Welcome to Spark This. I'm your host, Walter Kuhn. This is our second podcast series in our narrative series. Last time, we talked about narrative and how narrative compares to story. This time, we're going to be talking about the Agile Narrative process. So today in studio, we have our very own Spark's Chief Narrative Officer, Toby Trevarthen.
Hello, Walter. Glad to be here.
And sitting beside him is Tim Donovan, who helped Toby co-create the Agile Narrative methodology or process.
Hi, Walter. I'm also glad to be here.
So, Agile Narrative, what is it? What are you guys doing out there?
Well, I'll start. This is Tim. The Agile Narrative process is based on design thinking, which is a methodology for problem solving. It's really the applying of creative problem solving, usually done by interdisciplinary teams, so people that have different backgrounds. It's a creative process. It's a process that focuses on solving bigger issues through collaboration and what we call tapping into group genius. And that really means that you're getting different points of view to come together and to solve a primary objective or goal. Design thinking, I think, was really established by Tim Brown, who's one of the partners at IDEO, and we have found it to be a tremendous resource in our practice. Traditionally, design thinking had been applied to things like developing products, not so much in the realm of communications and marketing, but I think we found, as of the last 2 years, the same philosophy and the processes that have been used in design thinking to solve other issues can really be applied to the challenges we're facing in the communications and marketing landscape.
And I think one other thing to add to that is the word agile. Because we live here in the Valley, not only did we subscribe to some of the design thinking elements that Tim talked about, but I happened to work with a really fantastic group here in the city called Factory, who borrowed from, or I should say one of the founders actually came from Google X, so we learned a lot about rapid product prototyping and how we would apply that in a very disciplined manner to Fortune 100 or actually Global 100 companies to help them solve new product lines or culture issues or overcoming some element of breaking into a new market in a very condensed fashion. So literally, we did all that in 48 hours. So in combining what Tim was talking about with the idea of sense of urgency, could we collapse time with our clients, for our clients, and get to this group genius co-collaboration outcome in short order? So we basically took several elements from our backgrounds, experiences, and applied them, and lo and behold, Agile Narrative was born.
So in these Agile Narrative sessions, who do you usually talk to? Who are the players involved from, say, some of your clients?
Well, we kind of have the philosophy of you begin where you end. So there is a sense that this needs to start in the C-suite, and generally when we do our immersions, we generally have everyone from the C-suite, the executive team, and then it layers down into various cross-disciplines within the organization. Could be sales channel, could be someone in legal, someone from the finance team, someone from customer success. So definitely the core management functions, but also an extended layer down into the company. So we get that multidisciplined, diverse voice that Tim alluded to in the design thinking.
Great. Well, what kind of clients are you talking to? Like, what industries are interested in this? Is there anyone in particular?
No, there's really no one industry in particular. I think that the whole idea behind design thinking is it can solve many problems in many different types of industry. We have clients in enterprise workflow management, HR analytics, IoT, education,
mobile apps,
the list goes on and on. So there's, there really isn't any industry that couldn't benefit by this process. And so far, the clients that have engaged in our Agile Narrative methodology have been really excited by the outcome, because what we found is we're not just creating new narrative, we're also solving fundamental business problems. It could be a problem related to a product. It could be a problem or concern related to a go-to-market strategy. It could be things like, content and distribution challenges that a brand may face. So design thinking is really about trying to get to the nut of challenges. We particularly focus on narrative because that's the business that we're in, but we found that our design processes end up solving much more than just trying to tell a better story in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think one of the other side benefits too is we really get a lens into the culture, the organization. Are the team members glued together? Do they play well in the sandbox together? I mean, we get a lot of different insights all at once, and a lot of very interesting insights emerge out of that, which ultimately kind of lend itself back into the kind of concepts that we create for folks when we're done with the process.
And I would just add for the listeners out there, we have a very rigorous design process that we've created. It's essentially a 4-module process that we take our clients through. The first module is we look at the resistance in the marketplace. What are they trying to solve, and what is their competition trying to solve, and why hasn't it been solved yet? We then look at the heritage of the company. That usually boils down to the pedigree of the executive team and the people that contribute to the value of the company. Why are they in a position to start a new narrative or to solve a problem in a broad market way? Then we also look at value beyond the anecdotal. How are our clients transforming businesses today, and how will they transform businesses tomorrow? And then the last thing is we look at the aspiration. What are they trying to achieve as a business, and what do they believe the market needs to be, moving forward into another generation of value creation. So we take our clients through that, and in that process, we uncover all kinds of details and insights that a traditional messaging process or planning process would never uncover.
Yeah, that's fair. And then also there's a lot of homework that goes into it before we get there. So we have done pretty rigorous competitive analysis, and the clients have worked with us to co-create this design. So there's a little bit of their DNA and expectations involved in that. But to Tim's point, it's a very rigorous process, and we conduct it either in a 2.5-hour version, which produces kind of a lighter outcome, or we have a half-day version, which gets way more intense.
Since you've now done, multiple of these, have there been big surprises at the end? People going in thinking it's going to be one thing, but in the end, it's completely different.
Yeah, we're a dozen in now, and we just signed up 13, 14, and 15. So the momentum is building. I think we have seen several CEOs kind of not knowing what they're going to get out of the day and why they kind of signed up for this, because generally like a CMO or a chief strategy officer was the one that instigated the meeting. And by the time they're done, the comments usually range from, this is the best 4 hours we've ever spent. I got way more out of this than I thought I would. And I think at the end of the day, we find that executive teams and companies just don't get together anymore. Or, if it's twice a year, one time might be the Christmas party and you kind of, don't talk business. So I think the biggest surprise for us is that we help a company to coalesce itself as a result of this process, or the day, if you will.
Yeah, I'll add to that I think we find too that executive teams are so focused on the trees that they miss the forest. A good example of this is a company that we recently worked with and did a design for out of Brazil, and they had a very specialized product in the security realm. And what we uncovered through the design process was they really had a new category opportunity based on some features that they have that are unique to their product set, but they were so focused on maintaining a category position within the existing security framework that they didn't recognize or see kind of a unique market opportunity. And so that's the most exciting thing is you go in always with an intention or a goal in mind, but through this collaborative process and through what we call group genius, where you get this interdisciplinary group of people contributing, it uncovers these real gems. And to Toby's point, faster than you would normally have an opportunity to do that. So I think we've been really surprised and delighted at some of the things that we've seen as a result of these design sessions.
And I think the other big aha moment for me was, when I first got here, there was a lot of prescription happening without understanding the question for the solution you were trying to solve. Therefore, a lot of people were coming in, we could do this, we could do that, we could do this, we could do that, without really getting into the root of what was the real problem and why are we trying to solve that. And so we had to learn restraint on ourselves, that we had to let it manifest out of the day and remove ourselves from that prescriptive outcome and let the outcome kind of guide us on, what the solution could evolve to. And I think for me, every one of the dozen that we've done, I think we had a preconceived idea going in of what we thought might be the direction. And I would say 80% of that ended up being something completely sideways or left of where we thought we were, which actually produced a much better outcome.
The other thing I'll just add to that is, in some ways, the design approach we're taking breaks the traditional agency model of, bringing on a client, meeting with that client, getting a download of their business, then going away, ideating separately from the client, coming up with plans, coming back, and then having to upsell those plans or cross-sell those plans. And the process is complex, time-consuming. Sometimes it can be arduous. But with this process, the design process, the clients really are the experts. They may not have the tools to vocalize their vision in a way that is unique. And so that's what the design does, is it really pulls the vision out of the client. It's their creative genius that we tap into. And so at the end of the design, it's really about their creative processes and creative outputs. So when we're ready to go to market, the client, doesn't need a lot of wooing to move in a strategic direction or to make an investment, because they've created the outcome. So they're much more likely to support the end result in a faster and more meaningful way.
Yeah, and it's, we could go on and on because we're obviously very passionate about this whole process. But the other cool thing is that we literally flip back some initial thinking, what we call our first cut, within 96 hours.
Oh, wow.
So it really is a compressed, synthesized process. And then we germinate from there and go through a couple of revisions. But literally, from end to end, we're now getting less than 30 days.
That's impressive. Another question I want to ask you guys, Toby, I know you've said this before, that everyone has a narrative that's already out there. A lot of them might not be aware of it. Most of the clients that you've talked to now in your dozen or so immersions, do people have like a big problem, or is it more of just a pivot and course correcting where their narrative might be? I was just curious if it's companies that are in trouble or companies that are doing well but just want to do something better. What is your take on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It ranges. I think the word narrative and the whole understanding of what that means is still pretty abstract for people. And in fact, we are still working on that ourselves in terms of defining it, because you look at the work of John Hagel, he laid out some very nice blueprints, but there's still a lot of theory there that we're trying to incorporate into practice. And now that we're a dozen of these in, I think some of the patterns we're starting to see is that companies, to Tim's point, kind of get stuck in their trees and they can't see through the forest, and we can come in with an outsider view. And in fact, these things are starting to self-bucket now, where we've had inbound international clients who are doing things in the U.S., so they really need our guidance. And that usually takes on the idea of reframing a market or repurposing, re-identifying a potential market. And then we've had clients that are, Fortune 100s who have absorbed a company, or there's been a reorg, or there's some sort of alignment issue that they're dealing with where they're trying to figure out how to communicate to their internal as well as external stakeholders. And we come in and basically help them to get more aspirational than they otherwise would have. And some of them can't digest that. They aspire to go there, but they may not be able to go there for political reasons. And our mission is to kind of help them see that light, and that's starting to break through now.
Yeah, I'll just add to that I think there is a distinction between what many companies think is narrative and what is actually their brand story. Narrative, it really addresses friction that the masses face. And in the context of our clients, narrative is about giving people a reason to believe in their brand. And so typically narratives are things that impact all of us to some degree. Feeling safe, having clean water, being a good citizen, those kinds of things. And so when companies come to us, what they think is a narrative issue is really more about a brand impediment or a challenge. What we try to do is elevate their conversation and either create an opportunity or associate their brand with something that is of higher value. Can they sell product and provide electricity to people in third world countries? Can they generate revenue and impact clean water and make that more available? So the other thing too I'd say about narrative is that it should have some form of social equity associated with it to make it more valuable. I mean, people may not buy your router, but they may believe in your business if you're creating schools in rural parts of the United States. So it's not an easy thing to express, but I think more and more businesses are understanding this. I'll throw a shout out to Patagonia, right, who really believes in sustainability. And so they live that narrative by, I think, once a year or twice a year, having an initiative where they encourage people not to buy new jackets, especially theirs, and encourage people to reuse and share older jackets. So they have these initiatives that really kind of demonstrate that they believe in sustainability. Tom Shoes is another one where, every time you buy a pair of shoes, you provide shoes for somebody who doesn't own any shoes in another country. So we, through our narrative process, really want businesses to think about their place in the world, their impact on society, not just about selling products, but about committing to an aspiration that has social good.
And I think one of the things we talked about, and to add to Tim's point, we've shifted from a push society to a pull society as it relates to marketing. And if you don't resonate with someone's belief system today, they're choosing you versus you pushing on them that they should believe in your brand and buy it. And I think the generational elements really play out here, because millennials, for the most part, if you're not authentic and living your ethos, much to the examples that Tim pointed out, and or you slip up, I mean, you're penalized. So you're seeing that play out all over the place, weekly, daily. And the fact that media is now so always on streaming, you really have to have a through line in your company that resonates not only internally but externally with your customer base.
All of that is, I think, a really big, profound vision, I think, for companies to think that way. It's almost going from a company to a persona or a personality. So now it's like you are a company with a soul. Not to say that companies don't have souls, but you have to really think about your place in the world with everything around you and how that affects. And everything has a push and pull, like you were saying, but right now maybe more pull.
Yep.
when you go through the agile narrative process and you do the immersion and you get back to them in 96 hours, like you were saying, what is that output? What is the next step after that?
And to add a point to the comments you just made, that's why we play in the C-suite, right? Because this ethos and this notion of you're bigger than the brand has to really start at the top and be embraced. Hence, co-collaboration is so critical.
Makes sense.
Otherwise, this is not something that trickles down and cascades from top to bottom through typical hierarchy. This has to be reverberated through the company collectively with a sense of passion.
So to answer your question on what we turn around to clients in the 96 hours afterwards, 92, whatever that is.
It's been sooner, but we're kind of staying with 96.
There's a variety of things. I mean, one is always a communications architecture, and that architecture is a reflection of the collaborative design process that we take people through. Sometimes we explore neologism or the ability to create new words. We do that because if you've been in the communications field, you know that journalists hear the same thing over and over again, and most companies that are courting them say the same thing over and over again. So we use tools like neologism to give our clients the opportunity to introduce a concept and then author the meaning around that. So neologism could be part of the return. A glossary could be part of the return. As of late, we've done some initial brand campaigns that have been super successful. It really depends on what the goal is defined up front. But it can be any number of things. And in one case, earlier this year, we did a design for an IoT company, and the byproduct of that was a suggestion around developing an IoT-enabled water sensor. We had done a design at the same time that the Flint, Michigan water poisoning issue had popped up, and so one of the concepts was to develop a water sensor that could test the toxicity of water, if you were, at your home. And so there's a variety of things that we turn around based on whatever the client.
And those are nuggets that just happen to come out of the session. And in any other normal discussion, it may have just landed on the floor and stayed there, but we collect those kinds of nuggets. And ironically, the Flint thing is that's my hometown, so I have a little bit of resonance with the issues that are going on there. And it's things like that if you start to apply just your background or some of the reading that you've done over the years to these processes, you'll come out with things like what Tim was talking about was called IoT for impact. And IoT itself is ethereal, and if you can show an impact of where it's grounded and real so someone can grasp what the hell that means, that's where we can make breakthroughs.
So I guess to wrap up that question, the design process and the narrative is really a through line to connect a bunch of different things together. It can be a content strategy. It could be a go-to-market plan. It could be a product roadmap. It could be a partnership or funding strategy. It could be a plan to increase a company's social equity value. It could be a plan to shift a company's total addressable market, or what Toby likes to call the TAM. So that's the real, I think, breathtaking thing around the whole philosophy of design thinking is the creative output can literally be limitless. Which is, I think, for us, because we're creative thinkers, every time we do a design session, it just gets more and more exciting because we see the potential of sort of endless different types of output.
Yeah, in fact, today, Tim and I just witnessed a webinar of a client where we invented a whole new category for them that was here to date undefined, and they have accepted it. They've started to embrace it, and they've rolled out an ebook that was the highest performing metric downloadable that they've ever had. So it started to resonate with its audience. And today we saw the first cut of the research that they did against the category itself, and it was very validating. It was, a lot of the hypothesis that went into the concept, we validated through some strategic underpinnings. However, now the data's coming back, and it's like, this worked. It's working. It was on the money. So it's really cool to kind of see the validation, several months later now.
Yeah, I think what I get excited about is we are bringing, an IDEO or an Adaptive Path or an Accenture or a McKinsey approach to communications and marketing. The difference being that not only do we do the design, but we also do the execution. And so we get to be on this incredible ride of, from ideation to activation with our clients. And today was very exciting to see research that completely validated our narrative thesis, so much so that our client is so excited to get it to market, they just can't wait. And that is a real win when we have a client that's just passionate about the narrative they've created themselves.
And it changes the conversation, which is what the whole game is. How do we get people into white space so they can change the conversation and ignite the narrative that we birth?
It sounds like the narrative process, it can be ambiguous, specific, it can be powerful, it can have a social good to it. It really starts to get people to think completely different about where they are in the world. And that's pretty exciting and pretty powerful. And I have a feeling this narrative that you develop would also then become a tool, a roadmap for any other strategic partners that this client might be working with that can be applied to everything. So it has a consistent direction. It might not be even a consistent approach because things could be different depending on who they are, but at least a single direction, that through line that you were talking about a moment ago, Tim, which I think is really impressive. And to see the results that you guys are getting for something that is unique and different and will put clients, will form a different category for them to talk about themselves, I think is really interesting.
I would say, what, again, I think is exciting about this is we are changing the way our clients think. And, narrative or the design process is really about changing the me to we. It's really about building a movement. And so we are, in effect, teaching our clients how to build a movement that aligns or supports their vision. And they're thinking bigger and broader than they've ever thought before, in our landscape with journalists, the numbers are dwindling. The amount that are remaining are overworked, underpaid. The competition for airtime is getting steeper. Clients need a different approach, one that can really activate not only their customers and their investors and their employees, but audiences beyond that. And so we believe that we're on the precipice of something big. This idea of design thinking as it applies to communications and marketing is relatively nascent, but we think the time is now. And we're excited by the opportunity to work with our clients in this capacity.
Yeah, and I to add on that, to Tim's point, you wouldn't think of this coming out of a PR firm. And on some level, I think how we've approached this and how we are manifesting this, it's change. And on some level, you have to break muscle memory because there are certain things that clients perceive about what a PR shop should do versus not do, or my marketing communications is handled by multiple agencies or things of that sort. And we're starting to find that we are melting down a lot of the previous boxes and the barriers and the obstacles that, or perceptions, I should say is a better term, that exist. And I think one of the other dominant factors that are playing into this is the sense of what technology is doing. You've got the four horsemen who really control everything, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon. And I just read the other day on one of the studies that we looked at, I think it's Google represents 35% of all referring traffic. Facebook's like 40% now. So 75% of your referring traffic as a publisher is now to companies. And if they have filter bubbles that they put on so that the algorithms of what I get versus what Tim gets versus what you get are all different, if you don't have a through line as a company, you're filtered out. And I think that's yet to play out. But those dynamics are changing the course of how business is working and then how a brand survives among that chaos. In fact, I think we saw that today in some of the research that came out was that confusion in terms of how do you break through that and the impact it's having in the service business world.
Well, I think that is a really good way to end this episode of Spark This. I want to thank both Toby and Tim for their time to come in and to take us through the Agile Narrative process. Stay tuned. Episode 3 will be arriving shortly, and we'll be digging farther into this world of narrative and how that connects with futurists and clients and a bunch of other areas. So thank you all for listening, and Spark out.
Block out and see the bottom line rise. Spark.